So when I look out onto the landscape of modern business, I see huge trees. It's a forest out there, right? And there are huge trees like IBM and Microsoft and GE and all sorts of major companies. And they're so big that they sort of obscure your view of the sky sometimes. My job is as an angel investor. And so what I try to do is I try to plant little saplings with the hope that they will grow to the sky, that they'll find an open spot. And so what I'm going to talk about today is not specific specific ways that it works or solutions or technologies, but rather themes that I think that in my investing in the fintech and big data and analytics space, I think are interesting and potential open spots where small trees have the potential to grow into big ones. So these are some of my investments. pluffamp is a social analytics platform. It solves what I believe is one of the largest needs in analytics today, and that is not the need for incredibly deep learning tools or mining huge amounts of data for very subtle insights. Instead, it's getting data out to people who will use it in the right form, to the right people, at the right time, so that they can share it with one another and learn together and grow their businesses. MoneyTree is a business that brings people and financial institutions together. It's a business, it's a financial information tool that sits on your phone and that brings you all of your financial information. It's not a radical concept by itself, but it pulls together banks and it works as a cooperative piece of a financial network in Japan in a way that is, I believe, unprecedented. It has some big investors, including Salesforce and the 3 largest banks in Japan. Guidewire is a company that's already listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It's quite a big company now. It is an insurance lifestyle systems management company. They do software for insurance underwriting, claims, billing management, very prosaic stuff, but also what they do is they enable insurance companies to use their data to talk to one another in a very novel way. Shout is a very new company that does global instant voting. So if you have a view on a presidential election or on an athlete or a social movement, you can vote very quickly, yes or no, whether you approve or disapprove, and see how other people in your region or what they think of that. And then Cloudian is a software-defined object storage company. It's 100% S3 compliant. It provides, in a lot of ways, the infrastructure for the growth of big data. Although Amazon provides the cloud version and the version for basically individuals to respond and companies to respond and operate in the cloud, Cloudian operates on a hybrid basis and works within the on-premise data centers in large companies and has been growing quickly with that background and has received significant investment from Fidelity, Intel Capital, Goldman Sachs, the Japanese government within the INCJ, and Lenovo to do that. So I see, and I suppose we all see, a lot of money sort of flying to the cloud. But as an investor, I think, okay, great. Where is it going, and where should I be before it gets there? So, starting with the big picture, starting with the big idea. So, what are the themes that I'm going to look for? Why should I invest in big data? I mean, some people think that you should invest in big data to escape evil, right? And if you talk to the leading stars of Silicon Valley, they haven't done a very good job at escaping evil. So maybe that's not the solution. Instead, I'd say that it rests in three different areas. First, in making data ubiquitous. So making it possible for anybody to get data anywhere at any time. Dancing with elephants, which I'll explain in a bit more, but basically learning to work with the very large companies and finding a niche that is uniquely suited to a small company. And then working in multi-sided markets, which is something that I think is uniquely a big data and an analytics tool that they can take advantage of that a lot of other companies, that traditionally companies haven't been able to see. But this requires real creativity. So first, on to the idea of ubiquity. So I'm an Atlanta boy. And Atlanta is the home of Coke. And so I grew up with a Coke machine on every corner. And I spent all of my allowance every month, buying Coke products. The amazing thing about a vending machine and about a Coke machine is that it's always there. No matter where you are, you have an ability to make a purchase. And Japan has taken this concept to the wild extreme so that you can buy agodashi fish stock, right? Or you can buy yaki onigiri and French fries from a vending machine. I can't understand it or explain it. But the concept of having what you want, where you want, the way you want it, all the time, is a core concept of the growth of capitalism. And it's not just in the United States, it's happened everywhere, as Japan is obviously an example. The funny thing is that I think people don't realize that the same applies to data. People think, oh, it's data. I can get it on my computer and that's it. But there's really a lot of subtle differences because there are lots of different layers and different people who want access to different parts of the data and at different times. And making that available is, I think, an enormous unmet need. So one company, pluffamp, is doing exactly this. So it conceives of data in three different layers. The first layer, the backmost layer here, is of the underlying data flow itself, the raw numbers or the raw text that comes from Excel files or PDFs or what have you. The layer above is the logic that connects that data and has you do something with it. So you can to trade a stock or to send out a 500,000 emails or whatnot. And the top layer is the visualization. And the visualization is something that changes over time and that is very easy for anybody to see and understand. So the interesting thing is that different people interact with data at different levels and different stages. But if we're going to use our vending machine concept and apply that to the data, then we have to respect that difference and provide the agedashi only when, not put it on my corner, right? I probably butchered the Japanese, sorry. So this is one example of the kind of thing. Would you like to view more company details? Yes. You add it and you can get a charge on a sort of a micro scale for an additional set of data, for an additional piece of data that would apply to a certain kind of analysis. It's the kind of thing that's very basic. It's not rocket science in any sense, but at the same time, it's amazing how little this is available. And then social networks also. So whether you're on the data provision side or the data consumption side of the data, so say the left is the provision, or the left is the consumption, as the right is the provision, there's still a community that you need to interact with in order to get the most out of the data that you're working with, whether it's a deep analytical tool or whether it's the high-level visualization analysis, in a lot of cases, you don't want to just deal with that alone by yourself. You want to be able to work with colleagues and say, hey, does this make sense? But again, those tools don't really exist. And so that's what pluffamp is building. OK. Elephants dancing. Does this make sense to anybody but the Americans in the room? Probably not. If you think about big companies not as trees, but as elephants, it's very important to work with the big players in the market. And so if you think of them as the elephants and learning to dance with the elephants, with the IBMs, with the big Exxons, whoever not, it's very hard to do and hard to do well. But data is a particular it's a particular asset that is unusual because of its sensitivity. And it's also unusual because small companies, today anyway, have an advantage in manipulating certain kinds of data and getting access to it. But importantly, trust drives progress and trust drives expansion in this market. So companies have to really solve a critical issue in order to get that dance going. So this is something that MoneyTree has done quite well, I believe. Whereas the banks in Japan particularly face similar paralyzing regulation that Trump is about to do away with. And their core processes and core functions are very fragmented, and their customers demand mobile tools, and they have data all over the bank in all sorts of formats that they can't work with. What MoneyTree does is come in and unbundles and doesn't deal with the regulated side of the bank. It's not a bank itself. Instead, it has a focused strategy that selects just certain parts of the data and provides a new sort of core infrastructure to the banks with a clean, simple interface that allows them to leverage information asymmetries in the favor of their clients. So it's what I think it's an amazing tool because it is dual-sided. It both helps customers, individuals like you and me, and it helps the banks. It helps them bring them closer together and understand each other better. And so that drives me to the third theme, which is this multi-sided market approach. I think it's rare in the history of business, relatively, to have a company that will serve more than one market successfully. But that's really changed in the last, 30 years, when there are companies that will serve totally different market groups, not just business, but also consumer, and do so by doing that cooperatively. It's tricky, though, because there's a chicken and egg paradox, which is who do you focus on first? How do you get the data first that will be valuable to the other side of the market? And what drives that continuous momentum? And then, where is the low-hanging fruit from a data perspective? And then, obviously, privacy concerns can be critically important. The trick, though, is that if you get the cycle going, and you get the chicken and egg, the process rolling, then it's very powerful because then it creates a moat, a competitive barrier that other companies are unable to breach. So looking at multi-sided markets, pluffamp is multi-sided in that it works both with consumers and analysts. MoneyTree also works both with consumers and financial institutions is mediated by MasterCard and IBM and other intermediate suppliers. Guidewire has created a platform that bridges competing companies in its own industry, so insurers that compete with each other but at the same time share data in order to improve their mutual operations. Shout takes consumer data and gives consumers an enjoyable experience of voting on their own likes and dislikes and comparing those to what other people think in the market, and gives that data to marketers to help them know what the public will and will not respond to in various different areas, and then gives, for example, personalities, TV personalities, the opportunity to feed back their thoughts to their supporters. And Cloudian allows customers to manage their data in-house while at the same time also bridging that gap to the cloud data as well. So it probably sounds like doing this kind of thing is just all fun. It probably doesn't sound like that. But there are a lot of sleepless nights in investing in small companies. And so let me just give you a sense of what some of the major causes for insomnia are. So these are two different ways of saying the same thing. In the West, you say, I missed the boat. Means you lost the opportunity. And in Japan, apparently this guy with the hair in front means that his skin in the back, you can't catch him, because you can only catch him in the front. So it's the opportunity thing. Anyway, I found this interesting. The second nightmare scenario is this poor dog, right? And I don't want to be that dog, because basically, he's got solid foundations over here, and he sees this great opportunity. And sometimes the opportunity is that new shiny object. But often, well, you just want to make sure that you don't go off flying into space looking for the shiny object and not being focused on where the opportunities are. And finally, going back to the elephant analogy, when you're dealing with very large companies, it's very easy to get squashed. And so a big part of the sleeplessness is caused by fears of, what is this big company going to do? What is that big company going to do? And how will it change the market? And how can I respond if that happens? So before I turn it over to questions, just wanted to ask you. So if you have a question, I'd really appreciate it, but you don't have to. If you could answer one of these questions. How do you think you and your company and your environment will be affected by the three factors that I mentioned? And since we're all involved in data analysis, has anything come across your desk? Has anything touched you that you find is relevant to this? And that's it. Questions?
Thank you. This is very interesting. May I ask, what are some of the key questions you ask in order to try and differentiate between what might be a mirage and a real opportunity in your second nightmare question, your second nightmare scenario? So
in a lot of cases, I think the difference in every case, basically, I think it comes down to the people involved. And that's a especially when you're investing at a very early stage, the only thing that matters is the team. And so it's got to be a team, that you can work with, because you're going to go through difficult times and hopefully good times together. But it's also got to be a group that will listen and know when not to listen. Because, God knows I don't have all the answers. So it's got to be somebody with enough self-confidence and knowledge of himself that he or she is able to come to a good answer and a relevant answer. So, so in my mind, that team and that relationship is absolutely everything. It's very mushy. It's not, you can't put it down in numbers or pull it out of a spreadsheet. But that's the reason that I don't make lots and lots of investments, because I can't get comfortable with that many.
We've both been working here very long, and the title of your talk is The title of your talk is US Japan, and so how much of your investment activity or viewpoint or the value you create is related that you are maybe not a Japanese person in Japan, and how much of that is kind of the globalization aspect? I've seen one of your companies is now on the New York Stock Exchange. And how do you see the differences in the investment environment in Japan versus US or elsewhere?
So the question is US versus Japan and value creation. And so I see personally the point of difference that I have as an investor and as somebody who can add value to the two companies is because of that difference in perspective. And I've tried to do that at all of the companies that I've invested in. And I think I've done that in pretty much all of the cases. It's more relevant in some cases than others, depending on the nature of the business. And also sometimes businesses change over time. So Cloudian, for example, started as a Japanese company, changed, and then realized that its real future was going to be in the United States. I think having the greatest value of having the international perspective is just that perspective, which is seeing how different things play out differently in different markets and having that point of comparison. I think it's very helpful, really critical for a lot of entrepreneurs.
ジョナサン・エプスタインさんの講演以上で終わりになります。どうもありがとうございました。
どうもありがとうございました。